Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
How I gutted my HOA. This is the story of how I completely changed out my community's HOA board and foreclosed on one of their houses after they disrespected me. I got fined for ridiculous things by my HOA and got ticked off and decided to get onto the board. I then spent a year removing all members of the board I joined and replacing them with people that were pro-small HOA. I have since helped reduce policies and tried to make the community better for everyone. Backstory. A few years ago, I bought my first house in a medium-size, 500 to 1,000 homes neighborhood in a southern state. It had an HOA, but I actually picked the neighborhood because they had the lowest HOA dues in the city, the fewest rules, and the house was by far the nicest one I could afford in my budget. After a few weeks of settling into my new home in the suburban neighborhood, I was feeling quite content with my surroundings. The quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and well-maintained properties created a sense of community that I had been longing for. However, my peaceful existence was abruptly interrupted one sunny afternoon when I retrieved my mail. As I sorted through the usual bills and advertisements, a crisp, official-looking envelope caught my eye. The return address bore the name of the local homeowners association, HOA, an entity I had been vaguely aware of but hadn't given much thought to since moving in. With a mixture of curiosity and mild apprehension, I tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. To my dismay, I discovered that it was a violation notice from the HOA. The formal language and stern tone of the letter immediately set me on edge. As I read through the document, my heart sank further. The HOA had identified not one but two violations on my property that required immediate attention and correction. 1. My lawn was deemed not green enough according to the association's standards. The letter went on to explain that maintaining a lush, vibrant lawn was essential for preserving the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood and upholding property values. 2. My trash cans were apparently positioned too close to my driveway, violating the HOA's strict guidelines on waste container placement. The letter specified the exact distance that trash cans should be kept from the driveway and emphasized the importance of proper waste management for the community's overall appearance. As I reread the violation notice, a mix of emotions washed over me. Frustration, confusion, and a touch of indignation bubbled up as I pondered how to address these unexpected issues. I hadn't realized that the color of my grass or the precise location of my trash cans could be such contentious matters. The thought of having to navigate these unfamiliar HOA regulations left me feeling overwhelmed and slightly out of place in my new neighborhood. I was thoroughly confused about number one, as it was February in the middle of winter. So of course my lawn was dead, like pretty much everyone else's. So I had assumed that either this was a mistake or an existing offense from the previous owner. As for the trash cans, I kept them on the side of my house, and I think when the HOA came by, my trash cans stuck out past the side wall, maybe 1 foot, so how dare I? I shrugged them off and continued on. Come March, as the first signs of spring began to emerge, I found myself once again confronted with an unwelcome piece of mail from the HOA. This time, however, the situation had escalated significantly. The envelope contained not just a notice but an official fine for both of the previously cited violations. Each infraction carried a hefty penalty of $100, totaling a substantial $200 that the HOA demanded I pay within a mere 2 weeks. As I read through the notice detailing the fines for my supposedly inadequate lawn maintenance and the placement of my trash cans, a wave of anger and frustration washed over me. I was pissed. The arbitrary nature of these violations and the sudden imposition of fines seemed completely unreasonable. The thought of parting with $200 for what I considered to be trivial and dubious infractions was infuriating. Determined to fight back against what I perceived as unjust treatment, I decided to take immediate action. I wasn't about to let the HOA extract money from me for what I firmly believed were baseless violations. With a sense of righteous indignation, I picked up the phone and dialed the management company that worked in conjunction with the HOA board. After navigating through an automated phone system, I finally reached a representative. The lady on the other end of the line listened to my concerns, but quickly informed me that I needed to appeal directly to the board itself. She explained that the management company didn't have the authority to overturn or modify board decisions regarding violations and fines. Just as I was about to express my frustration at this seemingly bureaucratic runaround, the representative provided a crucial piece of information. She mentioned that I could present my appeal at the upcoming annual meeting, which, as luck would have it, was scheduled to take place in just a few days. This news gave me a glimmer of hope, a chance to state my case directly to the decision-makers and potentially have these ridiculous fines overturned. So I, of course, showed up to the meeting. Prior to it starting, I met with a few homeowners and learned that they were all there for similar BS violations, and were pissed off too. I then talked with one of the members of the board about the fine appeals process. He was older guy in his 70s, with short gray hair and a very worn and angry face. He asked what I was getting fined for, and when I told him, he just looked at me and said, "And you should get fined for that. Young people like you not taking care of their homes is the whole reason I got on this board. Learn to be a better property owner." This dude was the VP of a volunteer board telling me that I did not know how to take care of my house. What a sad life. The meeting then started, and the moderator mentioned that since this was an annual meeting, we would be voting on 3 out of 5 board members. They had some applicants to the board, and we could also nominate someone today. That's when I had the idea of how I could get my revenge. When the election part of the meeting came, I nominated myself, gave some BS speech about HOAs are not here to make money, and that I wanted to serve my community. I won in a landslide, and you could see the board members getting annoyed because they had scowled during my speech. After the meeting, I appealed my violations in a very elegant way, and they agreed to waive my trash can violation. As for the grass one, apparently since I had weeds growing in my yard, like tiny patch in the corner, they were still fining me because the weeds were turning yellow after I sprayed them. I was dumbfounded how they could get away with this, but they used a technicality in the bylaws that I had signed, so I ended up losing $100. The revenge. I will be honest, I had not expected this to work. After joining the board of 5, including myself, I was appointed secretary and had to help maintain meeting notes and review records. They specifically told me that I was not allowed to propose new policies, but I could vote on new ones proposed by the VP or president, which I later learned was actually a violation of their own rules. I voted every new rule down as long as I was in that position. I decided that my best course of action was to listen to how the others operated and look for an opening to get each of them off the board. The first opening came when the president, who literally looked like the most Karen woman ever, mentioned that she had wanted to fine for flowers that were not neutral color. Basically, if a homeowner wanted to add something like turquoise flowers, we would fine them. She apparently had a neighbor that had flowers that she didn't like, and she wanted to use the board to stop them. It was pretty insane. I then started my revenge on her. I started a message thread on Slack, since that's how we communicated with the other board members, and asked what they had thought about her policy and reasoning. After far too much deliberation, 2 of them honestly thought that this was okay. We agreed that the policy went too far. I then made a long post in the main channel telling her that her actions were not only wrong, but that she should be excused from the board. When she inevitably flipped out, I called a board meeting in the following week, and the other 4 board members voted her off for targeting a community member for personal gain. She gave a sob story about how the board was her life and that the neighborhood was like her child. But I didn't care. That was one down. I convinced one of my good neighbor friends to join a little later on to take her spot. The next members I targeted were the treasurer and director, as I wanted to save the VP for last. They were actually pretty easy to get off the board because they were very easily swayed by public opinion. So I made a fake account on Nextdoor and waited until spring, when most of the violations go out. When the letters went out, I looked for angry posts on Nextdoor. I then would comment on each one, giving them the first names of the 2 board members as the culprits, and told them to come to the next HOA meeting to appeal. It worked far better than I had expected. During the next meeting, over 50 people showed up and called out those by name. It was glorious. During the open session, community members grilled those 2 for their poor policies, even though they did not make most of them. The VP, now president after the other one resigned, tried to defend them but ultimately failed. The 2 members were so distraught after the meeting, and I told them that maybe they should resign, and they both did. That was 2 more down, both of which were replaced by a couple who came to the same meeting and wanted to get rid of these rules. Finally, the board had been flipped to 4 out of 5 people wanting to get rid of all these dumb rules. The president, however, was still same old angry, hateful man. He tried to add more rules to increase violation revenue, and we voted him down every time. He started to get annoyed but stayed steadfast to the board. I tried a lot of tactics to get him to leave, and not much swayed him. A few months went by and we started with a new management company. They had a much better style of property management, and a website for looking through our community's records as well as automated reports. When we got our first fines report, I hit pay dirt. The president's house appeared and he owed around $10,000. Apparently he had open violations that he had never paid, and the other management company hid it from the board for him, since he had been on the board for close to 7 years. So I looked into remedies. Since his fines were over $3,000, our bylaws stated that a majority vote of the board could start an HOA foreclosure on the home, which I still think is insane that HOAs can do that. So I got all the docs together and double-checked with the new management company that the fines were correct, which they confirmed. I called an emergency board session, presented the information, and 4 out of 5 of us voted to start the foreclosure process. The president got angry, cursed, and left the meeting early. We were informed a few days later that the president had resigned, paid his fine, and put his house up for sale. While I am sad we couldn't force a foreclosure, at least he was off the board. I am currently president to this day, and I have reduced the fining policy to be a maximum of $400, and homeowners can appeal any time that they wish digitally. In addition, I have banned any grass fines until May, and trash can violations have been super relaxed. Morale of the story: never fine me $200. Call me a stupid young kid and expect to not lose your house. That's not only a HOA problem, by the way. I see the same problems in other situations where bored, often old people full of chagrin get their grain of power from being on some sort of board. We once had an allotment. Is that the correct English word? It's like a complex of vegetable gardens, often just outside of a build-up area where people can grow their own food, that also had a garden commission. Their intended goal was keeping an eye on no gardens becoming overgrown with weeds that would spread to the other gardens. But of course there were a few old farts taking it too far, earning them the name Garden Gestapo. They had no power to fine you, but could ask the board to end you lease, though this never happened save for when people just straight up ignored their allotment. So they'd sent obnoxious and exaggerated letters, actual paper ones, about stupid things like some nettles growing on your dunghill and so on. Some people seem powerless in the rest of their lives, and thus very keen on abusing the hell out of the slightest power they can get. Not to the degree of 15M. At some point you have to take the most logical conclusion: people do not value voting. Especially young people, apathy plays a bigger role than deliberate manipulation, especially when you have such an ethnocentric and egotistical society as the US has of me, myself, and mine. To save any future argument such as the deliberate manipulation create the apathy, yes, but again not to the degree of 15M. We all know we should work out, take care of our bodies, study well, eat healthy, and so on and so on and so on. But we all don't, because we are imperfect with vices and selfish desires. Politics are affected by those desires and vices, from literal ignorance to apathy to believing others will fix it so you don't have to spend time doing it and go for some instant gratification activity instead. Good job, OP. This needs to happen more often. Too many people use the HOA as a forum to compensate for their own feelings of inadequacy by lording it over their neighbors. Where I live, HOAs usually send a notice of intent to foreclose, which is more of a threat to foreclose than the actual start of foreclosure proceedings. And bear in mind that to reach the notice stage, you have to go through several steps of 30, 60, 90-day late notices, demand letter, and a lien on the property. From what I have been advised, the HOA doesn't have much power to force a foreclosure at that point. To foreclose or not is actually decided by the court. The threat usually works and the homeowner ends up settling their thousands in outstanding dues as opposed to allowing foreclosure to proceed on their property. Of course, all states are different, but this is how it works where I live, North Carolina. Source: I am the president of an HOA, have been so for more than 2 years, and have never fined a homeowner. In fact, I instituted a rule that only after a third violation for the same non-compliance in a 12-month period do we even send a notice that the next violation may result in a financial penalty. Most homeowners will quickly resolve the issue at that point. And yes, we wipe the violation slate clean at the start of every year.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. to encourage us to make more videos. Please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.